Number 1. Arrogance or overconfidence. Arrogance or overconfidence, two traits that are often mistaken for strength, but in reality, they have the power to isolate you from those around you. It's easy to get caught up in the idea that confidence is key, and while there's truth in that, there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance. The Stoics, who understood the importance of humility and self-awareness, saw arrogance as something that could poison not just your relationships, but your own sense of peace. Let's break it down. When someone exudes arrogance, it's not just about how they view themselves, it's how they want others to see them. There's this constant need to broadcast their superiority, to prove they're the best, and in doing so, they end up pushing people away. Sure, they may look like they've got it all together, but underneath, there's a lack of true self-assurance. Arrogance is often a mask, a defense mechanism to cover up insecurities or fears of being seen as inadequate. The Stoics would argue that genuine confidence isn't about showing off, it's about inner peace and knowing your worth without the need for external validation. Overconfidence, on the other hand, is an overestimation of one's abilities or understanding. It's when you're so sure of your own perspective that you disregard others' opinions or refuse to accept that you might be wrong. The Stoics taught that wisdom comes from knowing how little you truly know. That humility allows space for growth, learning, and deep, meaningful connections with others. Overconfidence is the enemy of this growth. It traps you in a bubble where you're not open to criticism, and without being open to feedback, you can never truly evolve. This is where things get tricky. When arrogance or overconfidence shows up in your interactions, people start to notice. They feel it. It's like an invisible wall. No one likes to feel inferior, and when someone's constantly putting themselves on a pedestal, others can't help but feel small. Even if that's not the intention, it's the result. And people don't stick around for that. Relationships, whether personal, professional, or social, are built on mutual respect and understanding. When you come across as arrogant, you've already put a dent in that foundation. It's not that confidence is bad. Quite the opposite. Confidence can be magnetic, inspiring others to believe in themselves too. But overconfidence, well, that just breeds resentment. You might not even realize you're doing it. You might feel like you're simply asserting your authority or showing how capable you are. But the truth is, when you don't leave room for others to shine or even make mistakes, they start to resent the way you make them feel. And that resentment, however subtle, can make them distance themselves from you, even if they don't say it outright. The Stoics were masters at cultivating a quiet strength, a strength that doesn't demand attention but commands respect through actions, not words. They didn't believe in boasting about their achievements or overstating their knowledge. Instead, they focused on self-improvement and understanding, seeking not to dominate but to contribute. They saw arrogance for what it was, a weakness disguised as strength. If you want to make real, lasting connections, it's essential to check your ego at the door. Humility, not arrogance, is what truly builds bridges. So next time you feel that rush of self-assuredness, remember this: true strength lies in knowing when to hold back, listen, and allow others to shine alongside you. Number 2, being overly critical. You know that one person who always seems to have something negative to say about everything? The one who can't seem to give a compliment without attaching a but. If you're being overly critical, that might be how others see you. And let's be real, nobody likes being around someone who constantly picks apart their actions, ideas, or even their personality. It creates this suffocating energy, where people feel like they can never measure up. They walk on eggshells, waiting for the next critique to land like a hammer on their self-esteem. Now, before you roll your eyes and think, well, I'm just being honest, let's pause for a second. There's a difference between constructive feedback and nitpicking. Being critical isn't inherently bad, it can even be helpful when it comes from a place of care. But when it becomes a habit to dissect every tiny detail, that's when it gets exhausting for others. Constant criticism doesn't just highlight what's wrong, it casts a shadow over everything that's right. And you know what? People start to feel like their efforts are never enough, no matter what they do. Imagine this, you're in a conversation, and someone's sharing their idea or an accomplishment they're proud of. If your immediate reaction is to point out a flaw or an alternative that would have been better, you're not just criticizing the idea. You're indirectly telling them that their judgment, their creativity, or even their effort isn't good enough. That stings, even if they don't show it. The truth is, nobody wants to feel like they're constantly under a microscope. But here's the kicker, sometimes, being overly critical isn't about other people at all. It's a reflection of how you view yourself. When you're hard on yourself, that mindset tends to spill over into your interactions with others. You might not even realize it, but your internal voice, the one constantly whispering, "You should have done better," starts to shape how you talk to and treat the people around you. It's like a mirror, you judge others because you're already judging yourself. So, what's the solution? It's not about silencing your thoughts or ignoring your insights, but about shifting the lens. Start by catching yourself before you speak. Ask yourself, is this helpful? Does this add value? Would I appreciate hearing this if I were in their shoes? If the answer is no, maybe it's better left unsaid. Sometimes, a little pause is all it takes to transform a criticism into something uplifting. Also, think about balance. For every critique you feel compelled to give, find something you can genuinely praise. Compliments don't make you weak, and they certainly don't mean you're overlooking flaws. They just show that you're paying attention to the whole picture, not just the imperfections. At the end of the day, being overly critical doesn't just push others away, it isolates you too. People gravitate toward those who make them feel seen, supported, and appreciated. And let's face it, wouldn't you rather be the person who lifts others up instead of pulling them down? Number 3, constantly interrupting others. Let's talk about something that's probably driving people up the wall, even if they never tell you to your face: interrupting. Yeah, we're going there. Cutting people off mid-sentence is like tossing a bucket of cold water on their train of thought. It's jarring, rude, and let's be honest, it kind of makes you look like you think your words are more important than theirs. And no one likes to feel that way. You see, conversations are supposed to flow, like a good song with a steady rhythm. But when you interrupt, it's like someone smashing a cymbal out of nowhere. It throws everything off. What you're saying might even be interesting or insightful, but the timing? Way off. And people don't just remember what you said, they remember how you made them feel. If they feel dismissed, unheard, or steamrolled, guess what? That's the impression you leave behind. Interrupting doesn't just break the flow, it breaks trust. People open up when they feel safe, when they feel like someone actually cares about what they're saying. But if they can't even finish a sentence without being bulldozed, they're not going to bother sharing much with you next time. Over time, that leads to frustration. You might even notice them avoiding deeper conversations or cutting things short with you. Why? Because no one wants to engage with someone who treats communication like a competition. And let's be real, what's the rush? Interrupting often comes from a place of impatience or excitement. Maybe you've got this amazing idea and you can't wait to spit it out, or you're worried you'll forget your point if you wait too long. But here's the kicker, it's not about you. Conversations aren't sprints to see who can get their words out first. They're marathons of mutual respect. Even if you've got the most brilliant thought in the world, holding back until someone finishes shows maturity and respect. Plus, interrupting has this sneaky way of making people feel small. It's like saying, what you're saying isn't as important as what I want to say. No one likes to feel like their thoughts are being devalued. It creates resentment, even if people don't outright express it. They might smile politely, nod, and move on, but inside, they're keeping tabs. If this sounds like you, don't beat yourself up. This isn't about guilt tripping, it's about growing. Catch yourself next time you're about to jump in. Pause. Breathe. Let the other person finish their thought, even if it's killing you to wait. You'd be surprised how much more connected people feel when they know they're being truly heard. In the end, listening is an art, and not interrupting is the first brushstroke. Master that, and you'll find people are far more willing to engage with you, respect you, and maybe even enjoy your company. It's a simple shift, but it can make a world of difference in how others perceive you, and how much they genuinely like being around you. Number 4, showing fake or insincere behavior. One of the quickest ways to alienate people, without even realizing it, is through fake or insincere behavior. At first, it might seem harmless, maybe you're just trying to fit in, impress someone, or avoid conflict. But let's be honest, people can sense when you're not being real. It's like a subtle undercurrent that runs through your words, your actions, and your energy. And when someone is being fake with us, even in the smallest ways, it can be grating. It's like trying to hold a conversation with a mirror. You know it's not genuine, and that lack of authenticity creates a wall between you and others. The Stoics were all about being true to yourself and the world around you. For them, virtue was key, and virtue thrives in honesty. When you try to wear a mask, whether it's to get ahead, avoid judgment, or fit into a particular mold, you're doing the opposite of what the Stoics preached. You're putting on a facade and not allowing people to connect with the real you. And here's the thing, when people notice that you're not being authentic, it's a huge turn-off. Trust starts to erode. The connection is broken. Think about it, how do you feel when someone tells you one thing but you can tell they mean something else? Or when someone compliments you, but it feels more like an obligation than a genuine expression? It's uncomfortable. There's no real exchange, no trust, no depth. You start questioning their motives and wonder what they're hiding behind that smile or polite conversation. It's exhausting to interact with someone who's always playing a part. And that's what fake behavior does. It drains the energy out of the relationship because no one knows where they stand. The Stoics weren't just about not lying, they were about living with integrity. They believed that who you are on the inside should be reflected in your actions, no matter who's around. They didn't put on a show or act like they were something they weren't. And because of this, their relationships were deep, grounded in mutual respect and transparency. You knew where you stood with them because they weren't pretending to be someone else. There was no game, no hidden agenda, just pure honesty and an openness to connect on a real level. Now, you might argue that everyone puts on some kind of act at times. That's true. But the problem comes when it becomes a habit, when the mask becomes so comfortable that you forget what it feels like to take it off. When you're constantly acting in a way that isn't authentic, it creates a sense of disconnection, not only with others but also within yourself. The Stoics understood that living in accordance with your true nature is where peace is found. You can't find peace in constantly pretending to be something you're not. But there's more to it than just being genuine. It's also about being sincere in your actions. Saying you care about someone and then acting like their presence doesn't matter is where the real problem lies. It's when your words don't align with your behavior, and that's where the insincerity creeps in. People are sharp. They know when something doesn't feel right. And, over time, they'll grow resentful of the mixed signals. The key here is to find the courage to be real, to let go of that need for approval, and to simply be yourself. It doesn't mean being brutally honest all the time or saying things that might hurt people. It means showing up as you truly are, flaws and all. Authenticity attracts people because it's rare, and deep down, we all crave it. So, if you want to avoid pushing people away with insincerity, it's time to take off the mask, show up as yourself, and start living with integrity. Number 5. being overly self-centered. Let's cut to the chase. Nobody enjoys being around someone who makes everything about themselves. If every conversation somehow loops back to you, your problems, your achievements, or your opinions, it's no wonder people might start rolling their eyes or finding reasons to cut interactions short. Being overly self-centered isn't just annoying, it's draining. It sucks the air out of the room and leaves everyone else feeling invisible, like extras in the movie of your life. Now, here's the thing. It's not always intentional. Sometimes, when you're excited or dealing with something heavy, it's easy to let the focus shift toward yourself. But when that becomes a pattern, when me becomes your default setting, it starts to erode your relationships. People stop sharing their own experiences or feelings because, deep down, they know they won't get the same level of attention in return. Over time, they'll quietly withdraw, leaving you wondering why they've grown distant. The truth is, being self-centered creates a one-way street in relationships. And let's be real, nobody likes a one-way street. It's frustrating. It's lonely. It feels like shouting into a void. When you're overly focused on your own world, you unintentionally send the message that others don't matter as much. Their feelings? Secondary. Their wins? Overshadowed. Their struggles? Barely a blip on your radar. It's not just hurtful, it's dehumanizing. But here's where it gets tricky. Being self-centered doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it's obvious, like constantly interrupting or steering every conversation back to yourself. Other times, it's sneaky. It can show up as a subtle lack of interest in what others are saying or a habit of dismissing their stories to share your better one. It can even manifest in how you frame your help, doing things for others not because they need it, but because it makes you feel good or look good. It's a subtle kind of selfishness, but trust me, people notice. So why do we fall into this trap? Honestly, it's human nature. We're wired to see the world through our own lens. But just because it's natural doesn't mean it's okay. Stoic philosophy teaches us that true strength comes from stepping outside ourselves, from seeing others not as props in our story, but as fully realized people with their own rich, complex lives. Empathy is a skill, not a given. And it's a skill worth developing. Here's the good news, shifting the focus isn't that hard. Start by simply listening, like really listening. Not just waiting for your turn to talk. Ask questions that dig deeper. Show genuine interest in what others are saying, not because you're trying to score points, but because you care. And when you feel that pull to bring the spotlight back to yourself, resist it. Let others have their moment. Because at the end of the day, being self-centered is a lonely way to live. When you make space for others, you create connection, trust, and understanding. And honestly, isn't that what we all want? Number 6, displaying envy or jealousy. Let's dive into something nobody likes to admit but everyone's felt, envy. That green-eyed monster. It's sneaky, isn't it? Creeping into your thoughts when you see someone else living your dream or getting something you want. But here's the deal, when envy or jealousy starts showing on the surface, it's a surefire way to make people secretly dislike you. Why? Because it's exhausting to be around. Think about it, jealousy radiates a kind of energy that pulls people down. It's like this unspoken judgment, a vibe that says, I'm mad you have what I don't. Nobody wants to feel like their success, happiness, or even good fortune is making someone else miserable. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, and let's face it, it's a little sad. What makes envy even more toxic is how it warps your behavior. You might not notice it, but jealousy can sneak into your tone, your words, your body language. Compliments start sounding half-hearted. Conversations shift toward passive-aggressive comments or unnecessary competition. And the worst part? People pick up on it, even if you think you're hiding it well. Humans have a radar for stuff like this. They might not say, "Wow, you're being super envious right now," but trust me, they'll feel it. Here's the kicker: jealousy isn't just bad for your relationships, it's bad for you. When you let envy take the wheel, it's like poisoning your own well. Instead of focusing on what you can do to improve or grow, you're stuck obsessing over someone else's highlight reel. It's a losing game. Nobody wants to hang around someone who's constantly sulking about someone else's wins. It's draining. And honestly, it's a little petty. The thing about envy is that it's rooted in comparison. You're stacking your life up against someone else's, which is always unfair because you're comparing your behind the scenes to their finished product. Stoic philosophy has a lot to say about this. Marcus Aurelius, for instance, reminds us to focus on our own path, not someone else's. He'd tell you to stop worrying about what others have and start cultivating your own garden. That's where your energy belongs, not in wishing you had their life, but in building your own. And let's flip the script for a second. What if you took someone else's success as inspiration instead of a threat? What if, instead of jealousy, you felt curiosity? Admiration? Imagine how much better your relationships could be if you could genuinely celebrate other people's wins without feeling like it takes away from your own. That kind of energy is magnetic. People love being around someone who lifts them up instead of dragging them down. So, if you're catching yourself in those moments of envy, don't beat yourself up. It's human. But recognize it, call it out, and let it go. Shift your focus inward. The less time you spend worrying about what others have, the more time you can spend creating a life you're proud of. That's the kind of mindset that not only makes people respect you but also makes them want to stick around. Number 7, talking too much without listening. Talking too much without listening, it's a common trap that many of us fall into without even realizing it. Maybe you get excited about a topic or you just want to be heard, but before you know it, the conversation has become a monologue. And in that moment, something important is missed: the connection. It's not just about speaking your truth, it's about making space for others to do the same. The Stoics, with their emphasis on wisdom and self-reflection, had a profound understanding of communication. For them, true dialogue wasn't about dominating the conversation or filling the silence with words, it was about listening, observing, and responding with intention. They understood that wisdom is not just accumulated by speaking, but by hearing others and learning from what they have to offer. When you talk too much without giving others the chance to speak, you're not just missing out on their insights, you're also closing the door to deeper understanding and growth. When we talk incessantly without pause, we lose the flow of a conversation. It becomes one-sided, and let's face it, no one enjoys being in a conversation where there's simply an audience to someone else's self-promotion or storytelling. There's a subtle but powerful shift that happens when you dominate the conversation. People begin to tune out, and it's not because they don't like you. It's because the interaction feels unbalanced. It feels transactional rather than relational. You're giving them nothing to latch onto, nothing to engage with, because you've left no space for them to enter the conversation. It's like you're speaking into an empty room. On the flip side, the art of listening is where true connection happens. Listening isn't just waiting for your turn to talk, it's actively engaging with what the other person is saying. It's being present, fully absorbed in the moment. The Stoics saw listening as a vital part of self-awareness. It wasn't just about learning from others, but also about learning about yourself in the process. When you truly listen, you show respect for the other person's thoughts and emotions. You open up the possibility of empathy and understanding. And this is something that can't happen when you're talking over someone or steering the conversation back to yourself. People crave to be heard. It's one of the fundamental needs of human interaction. And yet, when we're too caught up in expressing our own thoughts, we unintentionally silence others. The problem is, when you're constantly talking without listening, people start to feel like they don't matter. they start to feel insignificant. It's a subtle, almost imperceptible shift, but over time, it builds up. The resentment grows because they feel like they're invisible in the conversation, like their voice has no value. The Stoics encouraged us to reflect on our own actions and intentions. If we approach every conversation with the goal of being heard or impressing others, we miss the point. True dialogue is a mutual exchange, a space where both parties share, learn, and grow together. It's not about filling the air with your thoughts, it's about making room for the other person to contribute, to express themselves, to share their own experiences. When you focus solely on talking, you forget this important dynamic. So, how do you break the cycle of talking too much? Simple, start listening. Not just to respond, but to understand. Give others space to speak, and when they do, truly hear them. Reflect on what they say and respond thoughtfully. When you make this shift, something beautiful happens. The conversation becomes richer, more meaningful. You'll find that people start opening up more, engaging with you on a deeper level, and, most importantly, they'll begin to feel valued. And isn't that what we all want, to be seen, heard, and understood? Number 8, lack of reliability or trustworthiness. Let's face it, when people can't count on you, resentment brews. Nobody likes that person who says, "I'll be there," but then conveniently vanishes when the time comes. Or the one who promises the moon and stars but barely delivers a flicker of light. When you're unreliable, you're basically telling others, your time, your trust, yeah, not that important to me. Even if you don't mean it that way, that's how it lands. And trust me, that kind of message lingers. Being unreliable doesn't always start big. It's those small, seemingly harmless moments, forgetting to follow through on a favor, showing up late, again, or casually breaking a commitment because something came up. Individually, these things might seem trivial, but they stack up. Over time, they create this image of you as someone who can't be counted on. And that's a hard reputation to shake. But here's the kicker, reliability isn't just about actions. It's also about consistency. If people never know which version of you they're going to get, if you're supportive one day and dismissive the next, they'll stop turning to you altogether. Why? Because trust is built on stability. If the ground is always shifting, who wants to stand on it? No one likes to gamble with their emotions or their plans, especially not with someone who's proven to be unpredictable. And let's talk about the ripple effect. When you're unreliable, you don't just inconvenience people, you frustrate them. You make their lives harder. Imagine depending on someone, only to be let down at the last minute. It throws everything off. It creates stress, extra work, and sometimes even a sense of betrayal. It's not just about missing an appointment or forgetting a promise, it's about the signal it sends, I'm not prioritizing you. But why do we sometimes fall into this trap? Honestly, it's often unintentional. Maybe you overcommit because saying no feels awkward. Or perhaps you genuinely believe you'll get to it later, but life gets in the way. The problem is, intentions don't matter when actions don't back them up. You might have the best excuse in the world, but if it becomes a pattern, excuses lose their weight. People remember the outcome, not the reason. So, how do you fix it? It's not rocket science, but it does take effort. First, stop overpromising. If you're unsure whether you can deliver, say so up front. People appreciate honesty more than empty assurances. Second, follow through even on the little things. It might seem small, but showing up when you said you would, or doing what you promised, builds a reputation that money can't buy. And finally, own up when you mess up. If you drop the ball, acknowledge it. Apologies don't erase mistakes, but they show you're taking accountability. At the end of the day, trust is fragile. Once broken, it's hard to rebuild. But when people know they can count on you, that you mean what you say and say what you mean, it creates a bond that's hard to break. And honestly, isn't that worth the effort? Number 9, being manipulative or deceitful. Here's a harsh truth: no one likes to feel like they're being played. Manipulation and deceit are like invisible chains, subtle, sneaky, but eventually, they weigh people down. You might think you're being clever, pulling strings behind the scenes to get what you want, but let's not sugarcoat it, people notice. Maybe not right away, but they always do. And when they do, that's when trust evaporates. Manipulation is like planting seeds of distrust in your relationships. Every time you twist the truth, guilt-trip someone, or bend a situation to serve your own interests, you're essentially saying, I value what I want more than I value our connection. It doesn't matter how you justify it to yourself, the message is loud and clear to the other person. And it stings. The tricky thing about manipulation is how it creeps into small interactions. It's not always about grand, diabolical schemes. Sometimes, it's as simple as withholding information to steer a decision your way. Or maybe it's exaggerating a story to gain sympathy. You might not even realize you're doing it. But here's the thing, most people are more intuitive than they let on. They can sense when something feels off, even if they can't put their finger on why. And that feeling? It sticks. Deceit, on the other hand, is like stepping onto a shaky foundation. Lies, no matter how small, create cracks. The more you pile on, the closer you get to everything crumbling beneath you. Sure, a lie might save you some discomfort in the moment, but long-term, it's a losing game. People don't just dislike being lied to, they resent it. It makes them feel stupid, like they weren't worth the truth in the first place. That kind of resentment, it doesn't just fade. Stoicism has a lot to say about honesty. For the Stoics, integrity wasn't just a virtue, it was a necessity. Marcus Aurelius might remind you that living a life of deceit disconnects you from your nature. A dishonest person is constantly at war with themselves, juggling lies, manipulating outcomes, and losing the inner peace that comes from authenticity. And honestly, isn't that exhausting? So, why do people hate manipulators? Simple. It's not just the act, it's the betrayal of trust. Manipulation and deceit rob people of their agency, their ability to make informed choices. It's not just disrespectful, it's dehumanizing. Nobody likes to feel like a pawn in someone else's game. If you're guilty of being manipulative or deceitful, don't panic. We've all had moments where we weren't our best selves. But it's crucial to take a step back and ask yourself, why am I doing this? What am I afraid of losing by being honest? Most of the time, it comes down to fear of rejection, failure, or vulnerability. But here's the thing, real connections, the ones that last, are built on truth. Even when it's uncomfortable. In the end, honesty and straightforwardness are not just about others, they're about you. When you stop manipulating or deceiving, you live lighter. You don't have to keep track of lies, second-guess motives, or worry about being exposed. And the best part? People will not only respect you more, but also genuinely want to be around you. Because trust? That's the currency of real relationships. Don't squander it. Number 10. Projecting negativity or pessimism. Projecting negativity or pessimism, it's like carrying around a heavy, invisible weight that you don't even realize is dragging others down. On the surface, it might seem harmless. Maybe you're just venting, maybe you're just being real about the difficulties in life. But what happens when that negativity becomes a constant undercurrent in your conversations and interactions? People start to notice. And over time, they start to pull away. It's draining. No one wants to be around someone who constantly points out the dark side of everything, who expects the worst before anything's even happened. The Stoics understood that our thoughts shape our reality, and the energy we project into the world becomes the energy we get back. When we're constantly pessimistic or focused on everything that could go wrong, we're not just seeing the world through a distorted lens, we're contributing to that distortion. We're creating an environment that reflects those negative thoughts. If you constantly complain about how difficult life is, how unfair things are, or how everything is doomed to fail, you're not only making your own life harder, you're subtly influencing others to see things the same way. There's something contagious about negativity. It spreads quickly, like a virus. If you're always expecting the worst, others will begin to expect it too. And even if you're not trying to convince them of anything, your energy does the work for you. Imagine being in a conversation where everything is met with a "yeah, but," or "I don't think that's going to work." It creates an atmosphere of defeat. People start to feel like they can't win, no matter how hard they try. It's a conversation killer. But here's the real kicker: pessimism doesn't just affect your relationships, it affects your own mindset too. The Stoics knew that what you focus on grows. If you're constantly focusing on what's wrong, you're blind to what's right. You miss out on the opportunities, the moments of joy, the potential for growth. Negativity blinds you to the good, and it traps you in a cycle of frustration and helplessness. And when that becomes your mindset, it's almost impossible to break free from. Not only are you projecting this outward, but you're internalizing it as well, reinforcing the idea that the world is a place to be feared rather than a place to explore. Pessimism also creates distance in relationships. People want to feel uplifted, inspired, or at least supported when they share their thoughts or dreams. But if you're constantly focusing on the negative, it's like throwing cold water on their fire. They begin to question whether they can be vulnerable with you, whether you'll encourage them or just shoot down their ideas before they even get a chance to bloom. And that hesitation? It builds walls. Slowly but surely, those walls turn into a chasm, and one day, you realize people are pulling away without saying a word. The Stoic approach to this is powerful in its simplicity: focus on what you can control, and let go of the rest. Instead of obsessing over the negatives, ask yourself, what can I do right now to improve this situation? It's about shifting the perspective from helplessness to empowerment. The world is filled with challenges, sure, but it's also filled with opportunities, growth, and the ability to shape your own responses to whatever comes your way. So, if you want to stop pushing people away with negativity, start focusing on what's within your power. Acknowledge the difficulties, yes, but don't let them be the focal point. Learn to see the potential in every situation, and watch how that energy begins to shift. The Stoics weren't blind to the harshness of life, they saw it, they acknowledged it, but they chose to focus on what they could control: their responses, their mindset, and their actions. When you start doing the same, not only will you feel lighter, but others will begin to gravitate toward you, instead of retreating from the cloud of pessimism you once carried. Number 11. Being overly competitive. Competition can be a good thing until it isn't. Sure, striving to be your best and pushing yourself to achieve more is admirable. But when that drive crosses the line into relentless one-upmanship, it stops being impressive and starts being obnoxious. Nobody likes feeling like they're stuck in some unspoken contest with someone who always has to come out on top, no matter the stakes. The problem with being overly competitive is that it's exhausting, for everyone. When you constantly measure your worth against others, you're not just making life harder for yourself, you're dragging others into the chaos too. Every conversation turns into a subtle battle. If someone shares a win, you feel the need to share a bigger one. If someone's struggling, you might downplay it by highlighting how you managed to thrive in a similar situation. It's not inspiring, it's alienating. Here's the thing, most people aren't out to compete with you. They're just living their lives, trying to do their best, and maybe hoping for a little support along the way. But when you're overly competitive, You turn those moments into opportunities to prove you're better, faster, smarter, whatever it is you're trying to prove. And guess what? People notice. They might not call you out directly, but inside, they're rolling their eyes and mentally stepping away. Who wants to share anything meaningful with someone who sees everything as a scoreboard? Another side effect of excessive competitiveness? It can make you seem insecure, even if you don't realize it. Think about it. If you're constantly trying to outshine others, it often stems from a need to validate yourself. But ironically, the harder you try to prove your worth, the less confident you appear. Truly self-assured people don't feel the need to outdo everyone around them. They're content with their own journey and don't feel threatened by someone else's success. Now, let's get real for a moment. Stoic philosophy teaches that comparing yourself to others is a recipe for misery. Marcus Aurelius famously said, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." When you're overly competitive, you're not just caught up in external validation, you're giving away your peace. Because here's the truth, no matter how much you win, there will always be someone faster, smarter, or more accomplished. Chasing that comparison is like running on a treadmill. You're working hard, but you're not really going anywhere. So how do you fix it? First, start seeing others' success as a reflection of possibility, not a threat to your own worth. Someone else winning doesn't mean you're losing. Second, focus on collaboration over competition. Instead of trying to outdo everyone, ask how you can work together or learn from them. Finally, take a moment to reflect on your own values. What's driving your competitiveness? Is it fear? Ego? Whatever it is, understanding it can help you loosen its grip. At the end of the day, being overly competitive doesn't just push people away, it robs you of the joy of genuine connection. So, relax. Celebrate others. And remind yourself that life isn't a race, it's a journey. Number 12, disrespecting others' opinions or values. Let's face it, nobody likes being talked down to, dismissed, or treated like their thoughts don't matter. When you disrespect someone's opinions or values, it's not just a disagreement. It's like saying, "I think you're wrong, and on top of that, I don't even care why you think the way you do." That kind of energy? It's a fast track to making people secretly hate you. Here's the thing, opinions and values are deeply personal. They're shaped by life experiences, upbringing, culture, and a million other factors you might not even know about. When you dismiss or mock someone's perspective, you're not just disagreeing with their idea, you're invalidating a piece of who they are. And let's be real, who wants to feel invalidated? No one. What makes this worse is how disrespecting others' opinions often looks. It's not always loud or obvious. Sometimes, it's in the eye rolls, the dismissive laughs, or that little smirk that says, "You can't possibly believe that." Other times, it's in the way you bulldoze conversations, cutting people off with, "No, you don't get it." Let me tell you how it actually is. You might think you're being passionate, but to them, you're being condescending. And nobody sticks around for that. Let's talk about why this is such a problem. When you disregard someone else's beliefs, it creates a wall between you. Even if you didn't mean to offend, the damage is done. They feel unheard, misunderstood, maybe even judged. Over time, this creates resentment, even if they don't say it outright. They'll just start avoiding certain topics, or worse, start avoiding you. From a Stoic perspective, Marcus Aurelius would probably have a lot to say here. One of his core teachings is that we should aim to understand, not control, the world and the people in it. He'd remind you that everyone sees the world through their own lens, shaped by their own unique experiences. Respecting someone else's perspective doesn't mean you have to agree with it. It just means you acknowledge their right to have it. And that's the key, respect doesn't equal agreement. You don't have to nod along and pretend you're on the same page. You can disagree without being disrespectful. It's about how you approach the conversation. Are you listening to understand, or are you just waiting for your turn to talk? Are you asking questions out of curiosity, or are you just looking for an opening to prove them wrong? When you respect someone's opinions, even if they clash with your own, you show them that you value them as a person. And that creates connection. It opens the door to meaningful conversations, mutual understanding, and maybe even growth for both of you. So next time you're tempted to shut someone down, pause. Take a breath. Instead of saying, "That's ridiculous," try, "That's interesting, tell me more." You might not agree, and that's okay. But in showing respect, you build bridges instead of burning them. And trust me, people remember that. Number 13, not showing gratitude or appreciation. Not showing gratitude or appreciation, it's one of those things that might slip under the radar, but it can leave a deep mark on your relationships, whether you're aware of it or not. We live in a world that's busy, fast-paced, and often self-centered. In such an environment, it's easy to overlook the little acts of kindness, the small gestures, or the big efforts that people make to support us. But here's the thing, when we fail to acknowledge these things, when we don't take a moment to show gratitude, it can make people feel invisible, undervalued, or even resentful. The Stoics had a pretty clear view on gratitude. They understood that showing appreciation isn't just a nice thing to do, it's essential for your own inner peace and for building strong, meaningful connections. Marcus Aurelius, one of the Stoic philosophers, often reflected on how important it was to be aware of the good in life, to acknowledge the efforts of others, and to give thanks for those things. And when you don't show gratitude, you miss out on that deeper awareness. You start to take people and their efforts for granted, and that's a dangerous habit. Think about it for a second. When someone goes out of their way to help you, or when they give you their time, energy, or care, and you don't acknowledge it, what does that say to them? It says that their effort didn't matter. It's as if they're invisible in that moment, like they're just a cog in the machine of your day-to-day life. And even if you don't intend to send that message, it lands that way. People want to feel seen, heard, and valued. They want to know that what they do for you matters. And when you don't show appreciation, it feels like you're just using them, rather than honoring them as equals. Now, I get it. Life can get overwhelming, and sometimes we're so caught up in our own world that we forget to express gratitude. It's easy to get wrapped up in the stress, the to-do lists, and the pressures. But that's exactly why gratitude is so important. It pulls you out of that autopilot mode and helps you become more present in the moment. It helps you see the good, even when things aren't perfect. And when you take that moment to appreciate the people around you, it does something powerful. It strengthens your connection to them. It builds trust, respect, and a sense of mutual care. But it's not just about saying thank you now and then, it's about living in a state of appreciation. The Stoics taught that we should be mindful of the blessings we have, whether they're big or small. It's about recognizing that people are doing their best in a chaotic world and that their contributions, however small they may seem, are part of what makes your life richer. Gratitude doesn't have to be a grand gesture. Sometimes, it's in the small, everyday moments of acknowledgement. When you cultivate gratitude, you create a ripple effect. You start to notice more of the good around you, and in turn, others begin to notice you noticing. It deepens your relationships, not just with others, but also with yourself. When you're constantly aware of what you're grateful for, it shifts your mindset. You stop seeing the world through a lens of lack or entitlement. Instead, you see abundance, you see kindness, and you see the people who are helping you along the way. So, what does it come down to? Gratitude isn't just a nice trait, it's a powerful tool for connection, peace, and emotional well-being. When you fail to show appreciation, it's more than a missed opportunity, it's a missed chance to strengthen your relationships, to build trust, and to create a deeper sense of respect with the people in your life. And when you stop taking people's efforts for granted, you open the door to a richer, more fulfilling life, one where both you and the people around you feel seen, heard, and valued. Thanks for watching. Understanding why people may harbor negative feelings toward you is the first step towards self-improvement and growth. Remember, Stoic philosophy teaches us not to dwell on the opinions of others but to focus on living with integrity and purpose. If this video helped you gain perspective, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more insights on self-mastery and personal growth. Share this video with someone who could benefit from these lessons. At the end of the day, how others feel about you matters far less than how you live your truth. Stay grounded, stay reflective, and keep building your inner control. Until next time, take care and keep evolving.